Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's DataServe webinar, where we're going to be focusing on automation for higher education. I'm going to go on to some introductions, so introduce the team and introduce what we're talking about shortly. But just to really boil down the topic of the webinar then, it's all about how automation, self-service and virtual agents can improve the student experience and reduce strain on service teams. And as we're going through the webinar, you might want to ask yourself a couple of questions. What could your service teams do with 50% more time? Obviously, it's not for me to tell you that. That's something sort of personal to your university. Could be things like creating more applications, for example, or spending more time on the tickets that you do have and completing them quicker within SLAs, for example. And you might also wonder, therefore, what positive change that would bring to your university. So not just focusing on the service side of things and the ticket reduction, but what positive impact could that bring when it comes to the student experience, perhaps? So hello, everybody. Thanks very much for joining. We've got a global audience today. So a special thank you to anybody that's joined very late in the day. I know we have some people that are joining very early indeed, so thank you very much for that. We just want to do a quick introductions to who we are first, and then we'll go into the topic of the webinar in a bit more detail. So I'm Matt Smith. I head up the pre-sales team at AIM. AIM is a consultancy and a software vendor, and we have a suite of products, one of which is DataServe, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And in terms of DataServe, I wear a few different hats. I'm actually the product owner at AIM, and a couple of years back when we developed DataServe, I was also our lead designer. And I'm pleased to say I'm joined by two of my colleagues. We have Steve Ackland here, who is AIM CEO. He's also an ITSM, so IT Service Management and Self-Service Thought Leader. And for those of you that are big on ITIL, within IT Service Management, Steve actually contributed to version 2 and Quality Assured version 3. Also joined by Tom Duncan, last but not least, and among many other things, he's a DataServe solution architect. And although I'll be spending most of the time talking through the presentation today and showing you DataServe, Steve and Tom will be on hand to answer any questions that come through. So please do post those in the Q&A section of the webinar, where we also have a dedicated section at the end of the session, where if you do have any questions that we haven't yet covered off, then we can discuss those at the end, some of which could be fielded to Steve, some of which could go over to Tom. So the webinar itself then, this is the format. We're almost bang on 5 minutes for our introduction, so I'm going to time so far. The next part is talking about the higher education challenge, and I'm not going to pretend that this is the only challenge faced by higher education, but what we talk about when we say the challenge there is around service teams basically being a little bit overloaded, overworked perhaps when it comes to the tickets that are assigned to them, and therefore what impact that has on the student experience. We'll then move on to the solution. So there's lots of different ways of getting around that, some of which we wouldn't recommend, some of which we would. So talk about what the solution to the challenge is. And then the largest part of the demonstration there will be actually in the system. So I'll log into DataServe and I will show you around. We'll actually be completing some use cases. I'll be acting as a first year student called Sophie, who's doing a data science degree, and she's got a few issues and requests that she needs to get completed and get submitted. And I will share that with you in terms of how she walks through the system to get answers to those questions. And then finally, yes, Q&A and next steps at the end. So if you want to discuss something like a free POC environment or a trial, want to discuss things like costing and quotations, that type of thing, but any other questions that you do have that we haven't yet answered throughout the webinar. So what are we calling the higher education challenge then? Just to start off, really, it's clear that universities rival the service complexity of some of the world's largest enterprises. When you think about the numbers of staff and students, but also the numbers of services that they have to run in order for that university to function, it really does rival in some cases up to the sort of Amazon level of company when you've got hundreds of thousands of staff and students. And that results in usually a lot more than millions of tickets being raised annually. And when I talk about tickets, I'm kind of generically talking about any issue that staff or student might have, any request or question or query that they might have that then goes off to be handled by some form of service team. So this could be IT, could be student services, could be facilities, for example. And quite rightly, students have got high expectations. They're used to using the latest technologies, particularly when it comes to social media and the like, and they expect to have a good online and digital experience when they come to university. Also, the other thing that sort of complicates the higher education environment is that there are multiple knowledge sources and multiple service management systems generally. This is a generalization. It doesn't necessarily apply to all universities. But what I mean by that is there are lots of different places within the university. It could be in SharePoint. You could have other knowledge bases like Confluence, etc., that contain answers to questions that people may have. And they may vary team by team. IT may have their own knowledge base on how to fix your printer. Student services might have a knowledge base on how to submit a mitigating circumstances claim, for example. So they're all different ways, different areas where a student may have to go to get an answer to a question, and also many different systems that they may need to interact with. And that complicates self-service, because I suppose if I, as a student, have got a particular question, and there are sort of 5 to 10 different places I may need to go to get an answer to that, I might not bother doing so. And therefore, even with large service teams, that can lead to things like high average resolution times. So people waiting a long time for their tickets to be completed. That naturally could lead to student dissatisfaction. And when it comes to the staff themselves, that could lead to burnout and high turnover. And ultimately, this type of poor experience when it comes to service management could have an impact on things like university rankings. Now, over on the right-hand side, I've got a few quotations. We've changed the names of people, and they're not direct word-for-word quotations, but these are based on conversations we've had with real people. So let's see what they had to say. James asks, why did I need to wait 3 weeks for my mitigating circumstances claim to be approved? By then, the deadline had already passed. It just made the situation more stressful. So it's a good way, really, of showing how this type of service strain can have an impact on students, particularly if they're already going through a difficult time. If you need to raise a mitigating circumstances claim, it could well be because you're already under a stressful situation, and not knowing whether your claim has been approved or not could lead to more stress. Annika says, after COVID, many of my lectures are still online, but the university doesn't provide a digital experience that reflects my fees. That one pretty much speaks for itself, but again, it's talking about the expectation that students have now when it comes to online digital services. Amber is actually in a service team, and she says, we're drowning in tickets and just don't have the staff to get through them. It's frustrating as I work really hard, but I'm unable to provide students with the service they expect. And it's just highlighting really that, if students are waiting a long time for their requests to be fulfilled, it's not for lack of trying. The staff within those teams are trying very hard. Sometimes they're under-resourced, and sometimes they just have too many tickets to work through. And then finally, Pippa says, I never know who to get in touch with if I have an issue. There are loads of systems, email addresses, portals. Sometimes I don't bother, as my requests normally go to the wrong place. And that's illustrated by this little visualization here. It's actually a video, and I'll play it to you later. And this just illustrates really, you've got a confused student community there in the middle, all of these different systems that they're expected to interact with. And of course, this is a very small subset. In reality, it's probably double or triple this, the number of systems that they need to interact with. And this is what I talked about earlier when I said this type of fragmented structure complicates self-service, and therefore means possibly as a student I'm less likely to try and solve an issue myself. I might be more likely just to call up or email in and get a ticket raised. Now there's a chap called Kirk Bourne. He's a well-respected data science influencer, and he ran a poll for us, a couple of polls on LinkedIn and Twitter over the past few days. And I appreciate there's only 4 options we provided there, but we asked the question, mainly targeting at higher education, service management, and student experience professionals, saying what is your priority for new technology when it comes to attracting new students. You can see there that self-service portal is pretty much in the lead. So I think that's talking to the fact that we do have this fragmented approach, and some way of having a really great portal on top of all of those systems could simplify self-service, improve the student experience. So what's the solution then? When it comes to having too many tickets or requests to deal with, you could double the staff members that you have in those service teams, but usually that's going to be sort of prohibitive when it comes to cost. Another way, of course, slightly tongue-in-cheek, is to halve student numbers, and obviously, we're not going to do that in order to reduce ticket numbers. So what realistic things do we have then to help solve this higher education challenge? Well, firstly, on the left-hand side there, we've got easier access to information. So if all of these fragmented data sources can be brought together, indexed, and then searched on a bit like Google, then easier access to information is going to mean that students can self-serve, get the answers to the questions they need quickly, and they don't need to raise a ticket with somebody. So imagine a Google search engine, basically, but that's tuned exactly to your data that exists within your organization. The next one there is automation of service requests. That's a really key thing. We're not just talking about getting access to information and answering questions. Sometimes requests that students have might need to be fulfilled in another system somewhere. And an example I'll be talking about a little bit later is if I'm starting a new project, perhaps, and I want to create a new team within Microsoft Teams to collaborate. That might be something that has to go to a second line team to get that created for me. And actually, with new technology, you can automate that process by integrating with the Graph API. And that means that instead of waiting minutes, hours, or days, perhaps, for that service request to be fulfilled, then it can be done in seconds. And I'll show you how that works. And possibly, and sort of optionally, a virtual agent to guide people through complex processes. Because it's not always great to, although there might be a knowledge article, for example, that gives you what a certain policy is or answers your question. If they're particularly long and sort of hard to read, I might not be able to find the answer to my question. So if there was some sort of virtual agent that could you could ask questions of, and it would go to that article and give you a response back, or perhaps to guide you through complex processes. So, for example, submitting a mitigating circumstances claim. That's another thing that I'll show you later. Service transparency as well, really big thing. Just being open and honest and showing staff and students what's going on with the services that matter to them can really help reduce ticket numbers. Because if you have an outage of an IT system, or perhaps the library is suddenly closed for whatever reason, giving students and staff the ability to see that information at a glance stops them from calling in, stops them from emailing in, asking what's wrong and when it's going to be fixed. And then finally, if you do have an engaging self-service portal, then that's just going to help drive up adoption. Something that looks a bit like Facebook and Instagram that people are used to using the latest technologies. That's another way. So all of these things together mean that higher education challenge that I mentioned earlier, you can actually achieve the goals that you want without having to double the number of staff in your service teams, without having to reduce student numbers and taking drastic action like that. Now, obviously, DataServe does all of those things. That's why we're having the webinar today. But I think it's important, before we go into the detail and actually show you it in action, I just want to go through a few bullet points here just to explain exactly what DataServe is. So it's what we call a tool agnostic self-service portal. You might be wondering what that means. Within your organization, you probably already have an IT service management system or a work management system for student services, for example. And that probably comes with some form of portal. Now, the issue with those portals generally is that sometimes they're a little bit outdated, but possibly more importantly, they're actually very heavily tuned to only working with that specific system. So, for example, the portal that you might have in your IT system isn't going to look at tickets that are in the student services system. So it's very hard to get a single pane of glass. What DataServe does although we have connectors and alliances with software providers, it's not tied to any one specific system. So it sort of sits there on its own above all of your systems below it. And that's actually what this little video on the left-hand side is, and I'll play it for you shortly, so that you have a single place to go to. And I've just put in brackets there SaaS, so it's software as a service hosted in the cloud. It also provides you with the ability to have an advanced search engine for your organization. So I mentioned having like a Google search engine earlier, and that's exactly what I'm talking about here. What DataServe does is it sits on top of all of your service management systems and knowledge sources. It actually indexes all the data that's within them, so that I've then got a single place to go to, a single search bar that I can type in and be directed to the correct resource or get an answer to a specific question. And of course, we have a virtual agent in there, multilingual, naturally, covers up to 35 languages out the box, but that can be extendable too. And out the box, we call our virtual agent Amy, but it's completely configurable. You can call it whatever you like. As staff and students are using DataServe as well, we're building up a really advanced machine learning model, which understands how useful certain resources are under certain circumstances, and tweaks itself accordingly. And we take explicit feedback from users. So, for example, somebody giving a thumbs up or a thumbs down on a user guide, for example, helps give some feedback. But importantly, and possibly more importantly, we also look at implicit user feedback. And this is the actual user journey. So we look from start to finish. What has somebody searched for? What did they then go on to use? Did it have some form of positive outcome for them? And that user journey, capturing that implicit user feedback, is key to then updating and informing our machine learning model, so that next time somebody searches for a similar thing within that same user community, they're actually provided with the best resource for their needs. And although we have loads of connectors out the box to connect into key work management systems and knowledge bases, we also have a no-code integration builder and automation engine. So this means you can easily extend what DataServe is integrating with using a no-code builder. So you might have a proprietary library system or an exam system, for example, and we can easily get sort of tickets and requests fired over into that. We can build automations to update the records in those systems without touching a single line of code. And I've just said this, but yes, native integration with many leading ITSM tools and knowledge bases. And that just means that you can get set up and running really quickly. It's also what we call appless. There's no app for DataServe. It is literally a single web page SaaS offering that you can access on any device. And it's responsive, meaning it'll respond and sort of shrink itself or expand itself accordingly based on whatever device you're on. So if you're on a desktop, then you move to a laptop, then you go to a tablet, and then finally you go to your mobile phone. You actually have the same experience throughout. It's just that the user interface is updated for your device. It's also driven by a load of new and great technology, so natural language understanding, machine learning, and a powerful neural network. And I'll be showing you these things when I jump into the tool. We also have GPT-3 capability. It's probably something you've seen in the news and online a lot recently. We can actually use that technology too in order to ask questions about specific resources. And very importantly, and we're very proud of this, DataServe is highly accessible. So anybody with accessibility needs can use DataServe with loads of different accessibility features. So for example, high contrast mode. I'll actually show you a list. There's lots within the My Profile modal. You can change line spacing. You can customize the colors of the fonts and the text and everything. So I'll show you that. And all of that together means that we have been assessed against WCAG 2.2. That's the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And we achieved up to the AAA standard there. So our little video on the left-hand side that we saw earlier, that's our confused student community needing to interact with a very fragmented service structure. And then very simply, DataServe slots itself in between the two there so that they've got access to them all through DataServe. And you'll see here a little university logo. This is our fictional university that we're going to be using very shortly. So I'll introduce, yes, the DS University, and that's what we're going to be using throughout our demonstration when I'm acting as Sophie, the first year data sciences student. But before we get to that, it's one of the final slides before the demo. This is then just looking at the impact that DataServe has, not just on the student experience that we saw there, but also on service teams. So right at the top, we've got the without DataServe experience. So you have your staff and students here, a load of requests coming through, and relatively low self-service numbers, usually around 5% or so. So that's a lot of tickets that are coming to an overloaded service team. And then very simply, the with DataServe approach, still the same number of requests and issues, of course, that doesn't necessarily reduce, but DataServe is sitting in there as a filter. And many of those requests are being solved by self-service. Many of them are being solved by Amy, virtual agent, and the automations that are in place. And then you therefore just have fewer requests that are going through there to the service team. All right, so here is DS University, and many thanks to the marketing team for creating a brilliant university logo that's got my face on it. Now, DS University, as I said, it's a fictional university, but we're going to say it's a top UK university. It's got about 50,000 staff and students, 1 million plus tickets annually that are solved and looked after by 25 service teams. So these are teams like IT, teams like student support, for example, student services. Now, they're doing pretty well, but the feedback that they generally have is over on the right-hand side. This is the negative feedback that they have with regards to the service. They have high average resolution times. So on average, people are waiting too long for their requests and issues to be resolved and fulfilled. And that leads, therefore, to poor student sentiment towards service teams. So when they're asked about the IT team, when they're asked about student services, for example, they'll generally say things like, I can't get in touch with anybody, information is hard to find, and things take too long to get done. There's also negative student feedback on digital experience. So they just don't like the online features that are provided to them. Everything seems very sort of manual and antiquated. And as a result, access to information needs to be streamlined. So they're finding it hard to find data and information that they need. And finally, there's just generally a lack of communication when it comes to issues. So where things go wrong, perhaps with services, the first thing you may know about it is when you turn up to the library and see that it's closed for maintenance, for example. Those things aren't communicated before they happen. So that's the DS University. And in our sort of fictional story here, they've just implemented DataServe a couple of days ago in order to help alleviate them of these issues. And as part of the demonstration, we're going to be acting as Sophie, who's a first-year student studying data science master's degree. And these are the things on the right-hand side that we're going to be covering. So we're going to start off with just an overview of the system. So I'm going to start top to bottom, work my way down, introduce the various components that we have. And then we're going to go through a few requests that Sophie has. So firstly, she's got some questions about the library. And this is where we demonstrate to you the GPT-3 capability that we have. So she's going to find a knowledge article, but she's going to ask Amy to summarize it for her because it's quite a large knowledge article. Sophie also is French, so her native language is French, and she's going to ask actually to get it summarized in French as well. She's also going to ask a specific question about it. She wants to know when the library's open, but she doesn't want to have to read through the knowledge article to find that information. And finally, we're going to book a study area as well. So it's an example of how we can integrate perhaps with like a proprietary library system that you may have. She also needs to raise a mitigating circumstances claim. And this is something that traditionally is quite manual. It has to get looked at by a specific team. But Amy has been trained on the mitigating circumstances policy. And we're actually going to go through a process to get that done all through Amy without needing to involve a human being. She's also starting a new project with her first year students, and she wants to set up a new Teams group, so a team within Microsoft Teams to do some collaboration. And I'm going to show you how we're using the Graph API to automate that process. And also an important topic is around mental health support. So it could be, imagine 2 in the morning, somebody's having a mental health emergency, and it just may be that DataServe and Amy is the first place they go to. We need to be able to respond to those types of issues appropriately. So I'm going to show you an example of how that might work. And then we'll just cover off with some other features. So I'll show you some of the accessibility features we have. I'll show you mobile support, and then I'll actually jump into the admin console, because if DataServe is something that you're considering for your organization, one of your questions will probably be how hard is it to administer it. So I think it's important that I show you what the admin console actually looks like. So we'll go through our various drag and drop builders, some of the no code features that we have, and we'll also check out some reporting too. All right, so that's what we're looking at in today's demonstration. So I'm just going to come out of the PowerPoint and let's load up DataServe. Now, I'll just caveat a few things here. Of course, we have our DS University branding here, which is primarily blue and orange with our black and white shield. Everything that you see here is all configurable with no code. So whereby you might want to move certain items around the screen, you might want to have more components or fewer components. You might want to change the branding, of course, to suit your university brand. That's all done within the admin console, and I'll show you that a little bit later. Okay, so what I'm going to do, starting from the top, I'm just going to move down and iteratively go through all of the different features that we have, and then we'll dive into those use cases that I just mentioned. So right at the top right, we have our notification bell. And this is a really key part of improving comms within any university. This is proactively updating Sophie on various issues and updates that are going on. We'll see this as we go down, but she's able to subscribe to certain services and alerts that are important to her. And that means that she's automatically updated when there is a new update. So, for example, there was a water leak in the library, pipe had burst, and she was automatically updated when that was fixed. So she knew she could then go in to complete her essay, for example. We also get updated about things like tickets. So when tickets are created and closed and that type of thing, she gets automatically updated there. There's also a useful My Profile section. The reason why I've come in here is twofold. Firstly, that there is full language support. So Sophie can change her language to French, for example, and the app will go through and change itself accordingly. And that's including the virtual agent. So the virtual agent will additionally also then start talking in French with the correct accent to Sophie. And then moving down, we'll come on to this later. This is where our suite of accessibility features lives as well. We also have a gamification engine, and this is all about trying to improve self-service adoption by injecting a little bit of fun and competition and perhaps some prizes into the process. And the way this works is that when people do certain actions within DataServe, they can earn points, which then sort of add up into badges. You can see that Sophie's earned 325 points so far, so she's got the Acorn badge. She's well on her way to getting the next badge, which is Sapling. And again, these are all configurable. So out the box, we go for these sort of tree-focused badges. But the whole point of this is that we would build a gamification sort of suite of badges that matches your university brand. And then normally what you would do with that is you'd have competitions like every sort of academic year or every month, for example, the person with the most points can get an iPad or whatever it might be. Moving down, we have our alerts component. This is pulling through data from various systems. It's not just sitting on top of one. This is IT service management systems, alerting, for example. And so we're getting things like university-wide communications about things that are going on, updates about things like the water pipe being fixed in the library, society's sign-up event, etc. And so if you can click the notification bell next to any record she sees where that bell exists to then subscribe to it to get automatically updated. We also have our what we call the AI search bar. And I can come here, we're going to spend most of the time of the demo later coming back to this. So I'll just quickly show you how this works. I can search for anything I want, but let's say my printer's broken. We do lots of clever things with the search term that's populated there. So we do things like corrections. We also look at the ontology of words. So we know that certain things are associated with the word printer, like jam and paper and ink, for example. And we actually search those automatically for the user so that they get a really nice cleansed and enriched search. And what we're doing here is looking across all of that index data that we have. So this isn't just looking at a single knowledge base, it's all of the knowledge bases and all of the systems we've integrated it with. And what we have here, you can see there's a machine learning model that's rating these articles. So these are probably rated relatively poorly for whatever reason by the users of them because they're rated quite low. What DataServe does is bring back the top 3. You can then click on them, see if that's something that's going to help you. And as I'm going through and having a look at these various resources, DataServe is, and here's a French one, DataServe is looking at my user journey and analyzing how useful they are. We can also filter. So there are lots of different filters depending on the types of resources that DataServe has found. And we'll see later a few more of those filters. But it might be, I know that I'm just looking for a knowledge article, so I can click that filter, or it's a request that I'm looking to complete. And then finally on this screen, you can see Amy is very proactively popping up here, seeing if they can help. And I can also submit a ticket down the bottom. If all of this rich information at the top and my chat with Amy perhaps hasn't worked for my issue, I can then submit a ticket. So we'll come back to this and we'll do quite a few searches within that to show you how that all works. Now I'll just show you a couple of the other components that we have within DataServe down here. And just again to reiterate, this is all customizable, drag and drop. And importantly, you can actually have different page layouts for your different user communities. So you might have your researchers, your PhD students, your students, they can all have a different view. So they're all set up in what's called a persona within DataServe. And then you have different page layouts and different branding associated with those personas. So we've got things here like my tickets. And again, this is a single pane of glass looking at multiple systems. So this is bringing back the tickets that I've raised in the IT system, in the student services system, for example, facilities, library systems, all in a single page here. And I can give that a click, have a look at my ticket, add a note if I want to, add an attachment, all that type of good stuff. Service health is really key. We've spoken a lot about improving communications, and this is a great vehicle for telling people about when things have gone wrong or when there's upcoming maintenance. So you can see here, Sophie is subscribed to the library service by clicking on the bell. That means that any updates to that service are popped in her notification bell. She can also click on that and see that there is a service outage. It's intermittent, so it's not like the library is fully closed. It's to do with the automatic library doors are broken. Please use the side entrance. So just a really good way of giving people upfront comms to help them. And also, as you can see here, that this is about maintenance. So you can even show things like upcoming maintenance, for example. So people are aware ahead of time that certain services within the university might be unavailable. A few other components down here. We have a calendar component, and within here we've got a few events that Sophie's interested in joining. So it's as simple as clicking the little calendar icon there to show that you're attending. Again, you will get updates within the notification bell saying when they're happening, and it also pops it in a table just below here, as you can see. My followed items, really key component here that shows you all the services that you follow, all the events that you're attending, etc. So you've got a really nice quick way of seeing what's on and what you're going to. And then finally, you can even do things like lectures. So maybe Sophie missed her last lecture and she wants to play that, and she can watch that within DataServe. So this is just an example setup. As I said, you can have it however you like. This is how we've set this up for this demo today. Okay, let's start off then. Sophie's got a few requests. She got some questions about the library. So I'm going to start off by searching for that. So let's search for library information. And you can see DataServe's come back there with 3 different resources. Again, not scored too highly, so maybe the user experience of those could be improved. We can actually get notifications over to the owners of those knowledge sources as well about how they can improve them. And we'll talk about reporting on feedback and the like a little bit later when we go into the admin console. So Sophie searched for that, and she can click on the resources, have a read. That's the knowledge article that we're going to be looking at in a bit. There's the alert talking about the water pipe leak, and there's a party at the library pub, and that's the event that she's attending. And she can filter these down, so you can see we've got more filters have appeared at the top here because of the range of resources that have been presented to us. So I can look just for knowledge articles, for example, or just for smart forms, which are service requests. We've got alerts there, calendar events, and even tickets. So you can see that possibly before DataServe went live, Sophie raised a ticket with the library team asking when it's open. And so that ticket is available to her there. And then finally, we've got Amy asking if she can help. So let's say yes. So what Amy's done is found this knowledge article here, this library information knowledge article. Now, it's relatively long, and I can open it up and look into it and read through it if I wanted to. But this is where some of these additional features really come into it. So let's say I want to get a summary. So Sophie's interested in summarizing that article. We can just click that button there, and Amy will come back with a summary. So I can quickly see when it's open, members of staff that exist there, cafe, study spaces, etc. Now, you remember I said earlier, Sophie is French and she wants to sometimes read things in French. Let's give that a click. Now, the great thing about this is that you may have a suite of knowledge articles. You might have tens of thousands of them, and you just don't have the time to change them from English or whatever the native language is into the languages that all of your students speak. So this is a great way actually of just automating that process through AI. We can also ask a specific question. So if I click on the Ask a Question button there, and I say, when's the library open today? Amy will respond to that question specifically based on the information that's held within that knowledge article. So if that article was to change, then Amy's response would be different too. And we can see today is Tuesday, so there's an awareness there. So the library closes at 9 p.m. Finally, just an example of the types of sort of automation that you can do that's linked to, viewing the library information form that we have here. Might also want to book a study area. So I can give that a click, and Amy will now talk me through the process of booking that. So traditionally, I might have had to send an email or fill out a form or call somebody. We can do this type of thing through the virtual agent. So I'm going to say I want it tomorrow at noon. Now, this is a great example of something called entity detection. Normally, when you're filling out a form, you have to give it in a specific format. We've all been there where you have to give day, month, year, for example. Nowadays, with the latest technologies, we can actually infer exactly what somebody's talking about using natural language processing, convert it into a date and time, and then we've automatically booked a study space for the student. So there's some of the types of things we can do there related to the library. And of course, these are all just examples illustrative of the types of things you can do within your university. Now, the next thing that Sophie wants to do, she also has to raise a mitigating circumstances claim because she had a short hospital visit. So let's type that in. And you can see DataServe very quickly, again, looking at all of that indexed data across the university. We've come back with a couple of options here. So I can have a look at the policy, which again is very long. And there's a form here that I might submit, perhaps traditionally, to raise a mitigating circumstances claim. And this form's an interesting one because it even says what's going to happen. This is going to go to the student services team. And it actually suggests, have you tried speaking to Amy? You could get a decision immediately instead. And that's exactly, what we're looking at here. We're kind of looking at the old way of doing things through forms and getting teams to look at them. But what we've done here is trained Amy on the mitigating circumstances policy. And there's no reason, therefore, why she can't actually act as a individual when it comes to assessing that claim. And again, I can go through and filter. And importantly, you can see she actually raised a ticket a couple of days ago saying, how do I raise a mitigating circumstances claim before DataServe went live? And we'll see that not only can Amy help assess whether Sophie is eligible, but Amy will also suggest, well, you've actually got an open ticket to do with this topic. Do you want me to close it for you? So we're not just helping the students, we're also helping the service teams out by reducing their ticket numbers. So we just launched that chat then with Amy. Just organizing the screen there. And you can see Amy said, shall I tell you about mitigating circumstances policy? Now, what I'm going to do here is show you it's an accessibility feature, but it's also just a great feature to be used by anybody. And it's the text to speech and the speech to text capability we have within the app. So I'm now going to turn on text to speech for Amy and let's hear what she sounds like. I've shared my computer sound with the recording, so hopefully you'll be able to hear Amy talk.
Okay, under certain circumstances you're able to self-certify. You can do this twice in each academic year. The list of eligible circumstances is quite long, so it might be quicker for you to tell me the reason, if you don't mind.
So hopefully you heard that. That's Amy explaining the mitigating circumstances policy with the student, and very helpfully there saying, yeah, I could tell you all the reasons that you could be eligible, but actually just tell me yourself and I'll work it out for you. And I'm going to do that using my voice. I had a short hospital stay.
Okay, it looks like you're eligible. I've also checked, and you haven't submitted any mitigating circumstances claims yet in this academic year. Can you please tell me which exam or coursework this relates to?
Now, a lot of things have happened really quickly there. The first thing is Amy's looked at my string there. I had a short hospital stay, and it does keyword matching. It understands ontology, and it uses the neural network to work out whether that is the type of reason that it could be eligible within mitigating circumstances. And of course, this is all just an example for you guys. It's all completely customizable to your policy. This is just based on an example policy based on my previous experience. So Amy's had a look and said, yeah, it looks like you're eligible. What Amy's also then done is checked against the policy. So we understand that the policy says you can't have any more than 2 self-certifications in each academic year. So Amy's gone off to the work management system where those tickets are stored, where those requests are stored. And yeah, it's all good. We don't have any yet this year for Sophie. And there are a couple of exams there, so we need to know, well, which exam or coursework does it relate to? So Amy's also gone off to the exam sort of coursework system to see which assessments or exams Sophie is doing, and that's ones really that have had due dates within the past few weeks and have due dates possibly in the next few weeks as well. So it's a filtered down search that's relevant to things that Sophie might want to raise a claim against.
Thanks, and how much additional time do you need? Okay, the coursework is due tomorrow, so I'll extend the due date until the 7th of February 12 noon. Shall we go ahead and do that? That's now been done. I also noticed you have an open mitigating circumstances case, 1421. Do you want me to close that for you?
So we've updated the exam system there with an updated due date with a related approval for the mitigating circumstances claim. And also, as you can see there, Amy very helpfully, she found that ticket 1421 that I showed you earlier. And so therefore, Sophie can choose, yes, that issue is now resolved, so you can close this ticket, or perhaps choose not to, because it might be slightly different, the content or the topic of it. The other thing that Sophie wants to do, I mentioned earlier, she's working on...
Thanks for working with me. If you need anything else, just ask.
I'll just pause there while Amy finishes her conversation with me. The other thing that Sophie wants to do is to set up a new Microsoft Teams team because she's doing some coursework with some of her students in the first year. So let's type in MS Teams. And there is a form there for us to complete. We can also go through this form with Amy step by step. And wherever you see this little chat button, Amy can go through and fill that out with you. But all I'm going to do is quickly go through, fill out some of the details here. And what we're actually doing even now is an integration with the Graph API and looking at real life user data from Office 365. So we're saying, like, here's the team that I want to be created so I can collaborate. Here are the people that are going to be in that. So these are possibly people within my project or research team that I want to work with me on that. And normally this is the type of ticket that would go off to a team to be done. And what we can do is just analyze based on whatever policies you have, make sure the team's name is correct, make sure the email address is relevant, make sure that those people are allowed to be in specific teams and manage specific teams, etc. And it'll validate that the request is therefore okay to go through. And what it's done is it's actually automatically gone through the Graph API. It's created the group. It's then converted it into a team. And the whole thing takes about 60 seconds, usually a bit less than 60 seconds. What we also do for visibility's sake is actually create, and it'll just take a couple of seconds to create our new one. There we go. 1428 is our new ticket that's being created based on that request. And you see it's automatically been completed because it's been fulfilled automatically by DataServe. So it just shows you how quick those types of processes can be fulfilled using automation. Otherwise, that might have taken a couple of hours, maybe even a couple of days for somebody to get to and to create that team on behalf of the user. And that's just one example of a system you can integrate with, of course. Any system with an API, the possibilities are pretty endless, and it means you can do loads of automation and save people time. We spoke earlier about mental health support as well. So of course, very serious subject, and this is just an example. You can see here where...
I'm so sorry to hear that, Sophie. Are you in any immediate danger of hurting yourself?
So it might not necessarily be the place you'd expect somebody to go to, but you never know. And if it's something that you're putting out there for your students to get in touch with issues, it may be that Amy is the only person that they speak to at that particular time, and you need to be able to therefore manage those types of issues. So we're going to say no.
Okay, if that changes, please call 999 immediately. In the meantime, do you want me to put you through to someone you can talk to?
And so we're providing some advice, and of course, this is all based on it will be based on your best practice and the advice of the NHS about what to do in that particular situation and scenario. It's all configurable. And what we're doing here is then transferring through to an agent, and we can integrate with any agent chat functions that you currently have. This agent chat that we're going to pass through to now is within a work management system called Remedy Force that Student Services is using to manage their tickets.
No problem at all. Transferring you now. Matt Smith has joined the chat.
And there we go. I can then speak to somebody about how I'm feeling.
The chat has ended.
And I've just left that chat there, and we're going to say goodbye to Amy. Okay, so those are some of the use cases that I just wanted to go through and cover off with you. We've got some time to cover off some of the other features, so a couple of minutes before we go into the Q&A. So let's start off with the various accessibility modes. So if we come into my profile, and we saw this earlier, if Sophie has dexterity issues, so she'd prefer to use her voice to navigate the system, she can do that. She doesn't have to type when she's speaking to Amy, as you saw. But we've got things like high contrast modes, certain UI tweaks to make it easier for somebody with a screen reader to navigate through. Again, UI tweaks to force the navigation bar to be static instead of sort of moving around. You can also turn off animations. You'll notice when I start typing as well, that automatically searches. Well, if I have a dexterity issue, it may be that I don't want it to automatically search because I might be slow typing. So I can turn that off. So I actually tell DataServe when I want to search. There's lots of different settings around that, even down to line spacing can be changed as well, down to text color and background color. Lots of different things, as well as what my default message input is. At the moment, it's keyboard because I like typing generally. But again, it might be that actually I want to use my voice instead of my keyboard. And I'll just show you our high contrast mode. Looks something like this. Mobile support. So spoke about this earlier. Let's just click into mobile support. We've got a bit of a sort of an emulator here to show you how that works. So again, it's app plus, no need for an app. You just have the ability to access DataServe on any device that's connected to the internet, and you get the same functionality. That's the important thing here. So where we've had a chat with the virtual agent, where we've been kicking off things like automations, etc., that's all handled through the mobile or the tablet just as well as it's handled through the main app, because it's all one thing really, just being displayed on different devices. And then finally, let me show you a little bit about the admin console, because I mentioned I wanted to show you how it's all sort of built really. Start off with our page builder. You have the ability to construct everything that you've seen here with this drag and drop builder. You have loads of different components on the left hand side. You can change their order here, so you get a preview of what this looks like. And then each of these where you see a cog, you've got various settings that are associated with them. So you can build up what the app looks like without any coding knowledge, and you can therefore assign this to whatever personas you want to assign it to. This is where you can customize it for your different user communities. We also have a no-code neural network. So this is Amy's brain, essentially. And you can actually visualize what the neural network looks like. You can even test it. So these are all the different words, all the different ontology understanding that we have, what intents they're linked to. And you can create new intents, all again, without any coding. So you can get Amy to respond accordingly without understanding how to code. Similarly, we have our no-code automation builder. And what we saw earlier was me kicking off that request to create a new Microsoft team. Well, this is exactly how it's done. There's just a few endpoints that we hit. There's some data that gets transformed along the way, but it's literally just a case of dragging in the relevant endpoint, linking them up, and configuring over on the right-hand side there. So you can be up and running with some quite complex automations within minutes. And finally, on to reporting. So we have an adoption dashboard, so you can see how well the system is being used, who's using it, what are they searching for, what types of resources are they using. You can also filter that by persona, so you can get a good understanding of that. You can also, and this is a really interesting feature, get an understanding of where your knowledge gaps are. And what this does is it shows you what people are searching for based on how popular those searches are and the feedback that's been provided. So we've got a search term up here, which is doing very well in terms of its popularity, and it's kind of average in terms of how useful the outcome of those searches are. And we have other searches that are less useful. So perhaps if I'm searching for the library and I'm not finding the information that I'm looking for, the dot would appear on the left-hand side here. And what's really important is to take note of anything that appears at this top left, because this means that it's a popular search term, but actually students aren't getting the help they need when they're searching for that search term. And all of the information people are searching on is available here. So you can see the keywords that they were using, who made the search, what they then went on to use, and then that's all shown here as well within the resource overview. So you can see which articles, which alerts, etc., which service requests are doing well, and even down to the virtual agent, which conversations are popular and helpful, and which perhaps need a bit of tweaking. So that's everything I wanted to cover. It's a relatively quick demonstration. We can always arrange for a customized one based on your specific use cases, because of course, it's quite a generic demonstration that I've done there. But we're going to go back now to the Q&A slide. And I've just put a few sort of metrics on here that you can see past the implementation time, what we look to achieve in terms of automation, and then what you can do if you contact me for a bit more information. We can get you a branded 60-second video. Can of course give you a quotation, and we do have an additional 25% discount throughout February for higher education. So over to Steve and Tom then, if you wouldn't mind, because I'm sure that you've had some questions flying through, and I'll happily answer those until we get to 11 o'clock.
Yeah, hi Matt. So
Hi,
I've
Tom.
got a question here. Let me just pull this one through. So, yeah, so you mentioned about training the virtual agent. How long on average does that take for an organization?
Yeah, it's relatively quick. The indexing of the data for your traditional size university, you're looking at about 5 to 10 minutes for the initial sort of indexing and training of that data, and then what happens every single day or hour or however frequently you want after that when it does a resync, you're looking at obviously less time than that. It can be seconds. It will rarely take up to a minute, because we're basically looking for anything that's changed. So yeah, you're looking for initially sort of 5 to 10 minutes to index that data, and then subsequent updates are very quick.
Hi, Matt. Thanks very much. It's very interesting as always. Question in relation to sizes of universities and education establishments. The question is saying, is this seems possibly just for larger establishments, but can it be used for the smaller ones as well? I guess that's who they're representing today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you definitely get the most out of it in terms of value when you're automating lots of complex processes, and it just turns out that usually those are sort of done by the larger universities. But however, yes, absolutely, anything down to our smallest customer is in the hundreds in terms of numbers of users for DataServe. So we're not just talking about your sort of 50,000 DS university style. Or the smaller universities will definitely get a lot of value out of DataServe too.
Okay, great. Thank you. I've got one more and I'll pass back to Tom if he has others. So this is not unexpected. So the question was around GPT. So it's a little bit thing at the moment, although I believe we've been looking at this now for quite a while. But they're asking what your thoughts are around GPT. Is it just a fad, or do you think it's going to be something that's really going to stay the distance and be a really useful tool in technology and accessing information?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly in terms of whenever you go to LinkedIn or YouTube, it does seem like a fad, mainly just because of the way people are using it. They're using it to tell jokes. They're using it to sort of, update their emails once in a while or write a bit of copy here and there. What we're doing is doing use cases that actually are useful to people. So if you're sort of looking on LinkedIn and getting a bit bored about what you're seeing people use GPT-3 and ChatGPT for, what we're doing is combining that sort of technology within DataServe so that when you do come across a very complex knowledge article that you don't want to read through, you can quickly ask a question and Amy will come back with the answer. Or as you saw, I might want to get it translated, for example. So I only showed sort of 3 or so uses of GPT-3 within the demo, but actually there are so many more. We actually interestingly have a video that is dedicated to using GPT-3 with DataServe on YouTube, and we can always link you guys to that, or you can just do a search and you'll find it.
Great, thanks. Tom, any more questions?
Yeah, just one more here from me. So how long does it take a potential new DataServe admin to get to grips with the portal? And do you have any sort of certification procedure or anything like that?
Yeah. So in terms of training, we have 2 different training courses. One that's the foundation level, and that's looking at most of the things within the admin console. We also have the advanced certification, which is all of the same parts of the foundation course, but it also includes things like the integration flow builder that I showed you when we integrated and created the Microsoft team. They take normally sort of half a day to a day, and there's an exam at the end of it. And yeah, you'll find that once you've had that training and done your exam, you're then up and running in order to administer DataServe. We also optionally have a managed support service. So some of our customers just don't have the time to administer it themselves. They'd rather we sort of do it for them. And so, people can send over requests to us and we can actually manage it as a service if you would prefer.
Great, thanks very much. And I think the hour now is up, Matt. I think we're running out of time for any more questions.
Okay. Well, that was brilliant. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and thank you for your questions. We will be uploading the video to YouTube, so we can share some links to you if you would like to watch it again later or share with your colleagues. and please do get in touch. We've got our details on the screen there. You may find it really useful to have a demo that's actually customized towards your use cases. So you can literally give me a call. We'll chat about the 4, 5, 6 use cases you have, and we'll actually deliver a customized demonstration to you that's based exactly on your needs, and it will be branded as well, of course, according to your university. Thanks, everybody. Speak soon. Bye.